Okay, once more please. Short story in English literature of the 20th century. Okay. Novel and short story as dominant forms of narrative in contemporary Western literature have developed different genres. At the beginning of the 20th century, prose reflected social, cultural, economic, and political challenges of that historic time, defined the change of society before the World War I, and then between the two wars. The test of time, the so-called test of time, may be a cliché, but in a genuine measure of how a work of imagination can transcend cultural boundaries. We should perhaps now speak of the test of time and place, as the best works cross boundaries of both kinds. The novels and short stories of Aldous Huxley, John Galsworthy, Herbert Wells, Evelyn Waugh, Somerset Maugham, than modernist writers, Woolf, Joyce, are the perfect expression of particular ways of looking at the world. The author has articulated a view which connects with the reader's search for meaning. It is, of course, perfectly possible for a work of imagination to make sense of the world or of experience. In this context, I would like to suggest you discussing creative activity of one of the prominent English writers of the 20th century. His name is Gilbert Chesterton, 1874, and he died 1936. He was one of the most prolific authors of the 20th century, one of the well-known writers who reflected the so-called test of time and place. He was Gilbert Chesterton. He wrote nearly 80 books in his lifetime. His subjects included social commentary, literary criticism, theology, biography, fantasy, and detective stories. And for example, today we are going to discuss a detective story. Gilbert Chesterton was a famous writer, and in addition to novels, he produced works in numerous other genres. So, Chesterton was born in London in 1874. He attended St. Paul's School. Later, he studied literature at University College. During these years, as a young man, as you can see, one of the pictures that I have found in the internet, I was so lucky to find it. As you can see, during his young period of time, years, he began writing first some articles on the subject of art criticism. Then he began a freelance journalist, and soon his articles began appearing in a variety of publications. In 1991, Chesterton and his wife left London and moved to a village 25 miles outside of the city. And there Chesterton continued to write lecture and debate. Here you can see a map where Chesterton lived the rest of his life. And on the photo, you can see Chesterton and his wife. During all his life, he wrote poetry. His first two published books were poetical works, although we know that he is the author of prose, but nevertheless, he wrote poetry. He also short fiction, especially detective stories. In addition, he wrote plays, but he was not always comfortable in the medium of drama, as he was at heart an essayist. He published a large number of non-fiction works, so fiction and plus non-fiction works. He was a great master of detective stories. And the detective story, The Invisible Man, that we are going to discuss today, is one of them. On this photograph, you can see Chesterton together with Bernard Shaw. Do you know Bernard Shaw? Yes. Mm-hmm. A very well-known playwright, and a philosopher, a writer, in the proper sense of the word. Okay, so let's go on. So he championed the common man, the family, faith, and personal responsibility, and he deplored in the fashionable glorification of decadence, which he saw as intellectually and spiritually bankrupt. So we can say that he was a realistic writer. And maybe he was interested in modernism and especially in decadence, but then he changed his mind and came to realistic method of writing. In addition, also we can say that Chesterton is known for his wit and his unique style of writing. He enjoyed making use of pithy and well thought out expressions. He was a master of brilliant style, and today I will demonstrate it for you. He enjoyed making use of pithy and well thought out expressions. And still, today and still nowadays, his works are quoted. Chesterton died in 1936. Much of his work is still in print. Here you can see the book cover of his famous Father Brown series. Father Brown series consists of several short stories. All of them are detective stories. And the main character and the main hero of such series is Father Brown, priest, Father Brown. The short story, The Invisible Man, was written in 1911, and it is part of the series, Father Brown series. This story is about a murderer who took advantage of the fact that many people are taken for granted because we see them all the time. I quote, "Nobody ever notices postmen somehow." Postman, почтальон. Many people always like that quote from Chesterton's Father Brown series. In Invisible Man, the detective priest solves a murder after multiple witnesses deny seeing anyone enter a home where a murder was committed. They weren't lying. Они не лгали. They just weren't considering the mailman as a possibility. Maybe someday anybody would experience this invisibility himself. For understanding these important details, it is possible to use a hermeneutic approach. What is hermeneutic approach? Today I'm going to speak not only about English literature, but about hermeneutic approach, one of prominent approaches to literature analysis of literary texts. Interpretation, I mean hermeneutic interpretation, is based on the ideas of hermeneutics and begins with reflection on the reader's own perception and analysis of the reader's background knowledge. This sort of reflection is called pre-understanding, препонимание, and it helps the readers to formulate a definite attitude towards the story. The pre-understanding consists of our prejudices, наши предрассудки, или предмнения, prejudices, which can be negative or positive. Negative or positive. Our pre-understanding and the hermeneutic horizon of anticipation refer to our cultural knowledge. For example, here you can see a translation, because I would like you to understand me better. So that's why I would like to suggest you some information in Russian. So you can see all these terms that I'm going to use in my lecture with a translation from English into Russian. The pre-understanding hermeneutic circle, I will use it. Then prejudices, horizon of anticipation, then hermeneutic interpretation. All these terms will be used in my future talk. So our pre-understanding and the hermeneutic horizon of anticipation refer to the well-known novel by Herbert Wells with the same title. Have you ever heard of the novel by Herbert Wells, The Invisible Man? I hope you have. Человек-невидимка Герберта Уэллса. I hope you have. No, you have heard The Invisible Man, Человек-невидимка. This Chesterton's short story also has the same title. Herbert Wells published his novel in 1897. In 1897. It is a well-known fact that the reader's appreciation of the book depends upon his personal experience, as I have already said. Anticipated sense also depends upon his age, education, as well as upon his intellectual and emotional impressionability. According to our prejudices, the title of the story brings to memory to another story about a scientist who arranged an experiment with himself and stayed physically invisible, физически, да, невидимый. This fact leads us to the possible question. What is the possible question? Is that man physically invisible as the character of Herbert Wells? This question allows us to go into the hermeneutic interpretation. If we compare the two stories, we can come to the answer. As we can see in Chesterton's imaginative writing, the postman, почтальон, is used to be unnoticeable in all settings. Outside in the street, in the parlor, in the cafe, at school or at hospital, in the crowd, anywhere he stays invisible. Because people used to see him anywhere. Nobody sees postman in reality. Here you can see a quotation from the text. You have not noticed such a man as this. For example, he took 3 quick strides forward and put his hand on the shoulder of an ordinary passing postman who had bustled by them unnoticed under the shade of the trees. Nobody ever notices postmen somehow. That is a paradox. So, and this detective story by Chesterton is based on this paradox. One of the main heroes of this detective story is Father Brown. Those who have already read the plot of the story, you remember that Mr. Flambeau, who was a detective, a real detective, he didn't manage to solve the mystery. But Father Brown, that was that man who came to the conclusion that the invisible man, the postman, was a murderer. So Father Brown, not Detective Flambeau, Father Brown calls him a mentally visible man in comparison with a physically invisible man in Herbert Woods. It leads the reader further on to understanding of the message of the story. There are several characters in this story. First of all, of course, Angus. Mr. Angus, then Mr. Smythe, a dwarf currently. Then Wilkin. Wilkin was a tall man with disfigured eyes. Косоглазый немного. So one of them was a dwarf currently, the other one had disfigured eyes, and Angus. So all of them were the three rivals, because they fell in love with Laura, another character of the story. Then a detective Flambeau and priest Father Brown. The characters are portrayed vividly in the story. Chesterton is a skillful writer in creating artistic images. Angus, the main hero, and Father Brown are real flesh and blood characters. Small Smythe, and Wilkin, present humoristic personages. One of them is a dwarf, I have already said, and the other has disfigured eyes. But Smythe is very inventive, possessing creative mind, as you can see in the plot of this story. Before I pass to understanding of the message of the story, I would like to concentrate a little bit on the brilliant style, itself. The following effective and colorful expressions for example, evidently in a state of strong but not unsympathetic cogitation, for example, Laura, then considerable exasperation, then a slight deformity. It is used to describe the inn, then clever, unrestful eyes. This expression is used to describe Mr. Smythe. Curious, cold generosity. It is used to describe the machines invented by Mr. Smythe. So the message of this story. Invisibility is a quality of ordinary individuals. It can be dangerous or useful. It depends on the context and the personal intention. Smart priest is better than a professional, and his recommendation at the end of the story is worth mentioning. People should be more attentive and observant. Люди должны быть более внимательными и наблюдательными. Тогда, возможно, вот такой вот номер не пройдет, когда почтальон убивает средь бела дня, и никто не замечает этого. Okay. So let's go on. second part of our lecture is devoted to another writer. This is Herbert Bates. He was born in 1905 and died in 1974. He is a British novelist and a short story writer. He was born in Rushden, Northampton, England. You can see here, I have found a very interesting detail. This is a memorial devoted to Bates. As you can see, Rushden, just a minute please. Rushden Amenity Society, Bates, author, born here May 16, 1905. This is a memorial board on the house where he was born. And here you can see a map of England, and this is Northampton, England. There Mr. Bates was born. On these photographs you can see Herbert Bates. I could find some photographs of different periods of time of his life. As a young man, a handsome man, and as an old man. You can see. Have you ever heard of Herbert Bates? Have you ever read? Никогда не читали? Никогда не читали. The story I'm going to speak about is time, время. Unfortunately, I couldn't find the Russian translation of this story, unfortunately. But I hope that you will be interested in the plot of this story. It is not very long, and maybe you will manage to read it. Why not? Because the plot of this story is very interesting. Okay. Herbert Bates, educated at a grammar school, then worked on a local newspaper. Disliking the drudgery of journalism, ему не понравилось суета-сует журналистики, he became a clerk. His new job gave him leisure to write fiction, and he concentrated on his creative activity, having the stable income. And in 1925, he attained his majority in publication of his first novel, Together. His first novel, The Two Sisters, it was published in 1926, was followed by a stream of novels and short stories as well as plays, essays, gardening books, mind please, gardening books, даже книги для садовников тоже были написаны Бейтсом, gardening books, children's books, детские книги, and several volumes of autobiography. Early novels such as The Fallow Land, 1932, and The Poacher, 1935, were mainly on rural themes, as he preferred to live in the countryside. And his vivid descriptions of country landscapes, seasons, and country folk characterizes much of his work. After the World War II, he continues writing prose. For example, The Purple Plain, 1947, Love for Lydia. This is one of the most famous book. 1952. The Darling Birds of May, 1958. And The Triple Echo, 1970. His many volumes of stories include just a couple of series. The Woman Who Had Imagination, 1934. The Flying Goat, 1939. The Daffodil Sky, 1955. Here you can see some books by Bates. For example, Love for Lydia, one of the well-known and one of the popular novels. But nevertheless, habit-based still stayed a prominent short story writer. Да? В основном все-таки он известен как рассказчик, как автор коротких рассказов, как автор малой прозы. He was at his best with the short story and was under the great influence of Guy de Maupassant. Have you ever heard of Guy de Maupassant? Слышали? Have you ever heard of Guy de Maupassant? So he was under great influence of this French writer. So the short story time, время. The short story time is not Bates' most memorable work. He has a lot of short stories which are much more popular. There are plenty of these. But today I wanted you to concentrate on this short story because I personally like it very much. And I hope that you will catch the general idea of this short story and maybe in future you will read it yourselves. Okay. Time is a little known short story, but it was published in a collection entitled 7 by 5 and published in 1963. And it was published in 1963. The previous short story was published in 1911 году, предыдущий, да? And this story that I'm going to speak about now, and it was published in 1963, 1963 году. So we now discuss the two stories. One of them was written in the first part of the 20th century, and the second part was written in the second part of the 20th century. Так, с первой половины 20 века один рассказ, и со второй половины 20 века один рассказ. Time. Time is a story of three old men passing away the day in the sunshine of a village square. Two of them, Reuben and Shepherd, are old and feeble. Ну, такие старые и немощные, скажем. With poor eyesight and can barely recognize his friend, Duke, until he is virtually upon them. Duke, despite being older than his friends, is energetic and seems to be eternal. He is full of knowledge about the world and enjoys telling his friends the news, often using jokes and tricks. И даже он, что над ним подшучивал, и даже не просто подшучивал, но и что, какие-то вот даже tricks, проделал с ними, в общем-то, какие-то смешные штучки, да? То есть подкалывал их, да, проще говоря. This particular day he showed his watch, наручные часы. The watch had stopped. Остановились часы. He tells his friends it is because of the electric. The electric in his body, and they believe him, just as they believe everything that he tells them. И они поверили. Он говорит, у меня электричество в моем теле, и они все равно ему поверили. Вот об этом такой смешной рассказ. That's a part of the story. Time. The theme of the story is, how can we formulate it? Senior age and young Weltanschauung. Weltanschauung – мировоззрение, да? взгляд на мир. And the idea of this possibility to stay alive and optimistic. And possibility, which is reflected in the character with the name Duke. Под именем Duke. Эта идея как раз и сконцентрирована. Any work of imaginative literature is a unique and complete world created by the author in precisely the way his imagination has urged him to create. A literary work is thus a fragment of objective reality arranged in accordance with the vision of the author. Plot of the short story Time, сюжета, consists of a few events in which the three characters are involved. So the events are made up of episodes. Introduction, when Duke appears from the other side of the square, then the dialogue between the old man, then the climax itself, culminация, and a talk about the stopwatch, and then the denouement. The fact that this watch has stopped could also be taken to mean that Duke, always so full of life, is coming to the end of it. Возможно, и его век, да, вот уже приходит к концу. When the watch is stored away from his body, it works without a problem. Когда он снимает часы, да, часы начинают работать. А он надевает, они перестают работать. So perhaps it is time to pass the watch on to someone else who will enjoy it as much as he has. We can see that in this story very little happens within the plot. It is merely a snapshot of everyday life. The most obvious message, obvious message is that time passes, most people buy because they let it. And at the same time, those who grasp life with both hands, taking chances where necessary, will make the most of what they have, just like Duke. So, in order to understand the composition, we divide the story into logical parts. Несколько логических частей. Then a hermeneutic circle can be used. So, what is a hermeneutic circle? It is based on interaction of the whole and parts. Целые и части. The sense of the whole determines the functions and the meaning of the parts, and understanding of the parts influences on the significance of the whole. Движение по герменевтическому кругу от частей к целому и наоборот от целого к его частям – это и есть герменевтический круг. The process of understanding moves in this circle, from the parts to the whole and then back. The hermeneutic approach emphasizes the circularity of understanding. круговая природа понимания. So for this purpose, we divide the story into logical part and use hermeneutic circle. Then, in order to come into the circle, we formulate a question to the text. What is time in the story? Ну, вопрос, да? А что это время, да, в этом рассказе? Our movement within the hermeneutic circle will help to answer this question. The episodes in their turn of smaller action details, among them we can see the effect the Duke produced on solemnly dreaming and half-sleeping elderly persons, great impression. Then manipulation with the watch. Then mysteriously, how the watch mysteriously didn't work. And then the watchmaker's words. Then the electric light within Duke and how he went away. The initial impression of old men sitting in a village square in the sunshine is that the story must be set in Italy or some other warm European country. It creates a hermeneutic category, horizon of anticipation, горизонт ожидания. Когда мы читаем, у нас образуется горизонт ожидания. This wouldn't be unusual, although Bates underlined in his description the quintessence of Englishness. Да, вот мы читаем, и такое впечатление, что, ну, может быть, в Англии, а может быть, не в Англии, ну, в какой-то южной стране. Although Bates underlines the quintessence of Englishness, то есть квинтэссенцию именно английскости, да, английская природа подчеркивает. To a large extent, the location isn't important. The key to this short story is the characters and their relationship with time. And then we pass to another aspect of our analysis. This is his brilliant style. As well as Chesterton Bates is a master of style. Bates uses different ways to express implied meaning. Художественный стиль. As always, Bates' ability to weave beautiful pictures of simple everyday life in just a few words is exceptional. Bates умеет достаточно простыми словами, ну, достаточно простую обстановку обрисовать очень интересно. There are three major word groups in the story time that might associate with a particular idea or subject. For example, words associated with the old man. Words старика. For example, drooping skins, deafness, dim-eyed amazement, затуманенный, да, rustic clothes, mumble, murmured, мямлит, да, что-то, да? Huddling bones, toothless, беззубый, ancient comprehension, dribbling solemnity, gloomy silence, потухший взгляд, и так далее. Да? So all these words characterized the old men, the two old men, who were much younger than Duke. And we can compare the words associated with Duke. White, earrings, clear, brisk voice, отчетливый, да, голос. Then immemorial, amazing, gaiety, immemorial gaiety, amazing, strenuous body, patriarch, diminished perpetual youth. Почти дьявольская, значит, да, молодость. Lusterly, nimbleness. Nimbleness это что? Очень, да, бодрость такая, да, strong, flourish, цветущий, да, цветущий. So, if we compare, these two group of words, we can say that Duke is described also vividly, and he looks much younger than his friend, right? Do you agree with me? Then words associated with a description of nature. Nature plays a very important role in this story, especially the sun. So you can see the word combinations. Pink flushed blossom, hot sunshine, drooping leaves, marvelous blue serenity, pure blaze, marvelous blue serenity white, brilliance candelabra, countless, amber mist, янтарный такой вот туман, chestnut tree. Значит, все происходит под ореховым деревом, chestnut tree. Почему и вдруг возникает ассоциация с каким-то южным городком, да, с маленьким каким-то южным городком. Duke is described as follows. As they sat, the two old men waited for Duke to speak. And they waited like men awaiting an oracle. Как оракул, да, ждут. Since he was, in their eyes, a masterpiece of a man, выдающийся человек. Then also, it was as though they began to understand at last the lustiness of Duke's life, the nimbleness of his mind, the amazing usefulness of his patriarchal limbs. He retreated nimbly across the square in the hot sunshine, and the old man sat staring after him with the innocence of solemn wonder. На него смотрели как на какое-то чудо. So you can see the vivid description of Duke, one of the main characters of the short story. The author uses different techniques of character drawing, of character portrayal. In this story, the direct method of characterization is dominant. And the characters are depicted through the actions. Of course, this is one of the main devices. Through the actions, then the appearance, then setting, and of course dialogues. It's a dialogue, as you can you can understand. Duke is dominant. He's the main figure because he always have very interesting ideas, very interesting and even shocked information. And he's the source of information. То есть источник информации для них, да, приносит какую-то интересную, обычно для них информацию. Dialogues. We have been going within the hermeneutic circle. So what we have done? Что мы сделали? What we have done? We have analyzed each logical part of the plots. Then we analyzed the way of the characters' portrayal. Then we analyzed the words, the brilliant style of the author. All these are part of the hermeneutic circle. Okay? Should you understand me? All these are part of the hermeneutic circle. And then, now, it's time to gather all this information into the general one. А теперь, значит, мы должны свести всю эту информацию вместе. And in order to generalize all we have done, We are approaching now to the title of the story. So now let's comment upon the title of the story. The author implies about time, reflection upon the sense of life. Hermeneutic analyzes our prejudices, as I have already said. Наши предмнения наши, наши фоновые знания. For example, my prejudices are connected with my background knowledge, educational and cultural context. And from the point of view of my background knowledge, I can comment upon the title of the story Time in the following way. Time is something abstract, eternal, virtual, without boundaries, what is not seen or touched. Time can be considered on different levels. Literary time, this is wonderful. Then time is a category of universe, with the capital letters, but shouldn't read that, you can use the capital letter. Subjective time personified in Duke. Как это в старике по имени Duke, да? And apparently, so time is personified in his friends. This is another case, по-другому совсем. And time is defined by the watch, which had stopped. So we can see so different forms of the same notion, time. Time on different levels. So our analysis of the title of the story helps us understand the message. What do you think, by the way? Maybe you have some commentaries upon the title of the story? How did you understand? So you're welcome.
The novels, the fact is of the literature, I think, is novels in the and I think American literature is
English literature.
English,
it's English literature.
English literature. What do you think about short story about in Russia? Maybe in
you mean the same idea in short stories, in Russian short stories?
Yes, English short stories and
Russian short stories. So you would like to underline the connections between Russian short stories with the same implication and English short stories. For example, short story Time. You mean especially time? Especially time. Вообще время, да, как таковое время. I think it depends on the national context, the national character. Time in Russia, I think, as far as Russian writers present, I think time goes slowly. More slowly than in English literature. And much more slowly than in American literature. And I think it depends on our culture. And also it depends on the American culture, an American perception of the world. This is a difference, I think. But let's come back to these particular short stories. What do you mean? Maybe you have some other understanding of the title. Maybe you have something more to add. You can express yourself in Russian, no problem. Можете по-русски говорить, no problem. It's not obligatory to express yourself in English. because you are not students of the Faculty of Foreign Languages. It's not, for them it is a must, but for you it's not a must. Yes, you can say it in Russian. Please, anybody? Any volunteers? Don't be shy. Не стесняйтесь. Feel free to express yourself. Да, по-русски, пожалуйста. Таня, do you think anything?
Repeat the question, please. Repeat the question, please.
How do you understand the title of the story?
The title of the story. The title of the story can understand. The title of the story has many terms. The term is subjective time. The term is the age of the man.
You're right.
Yes, the man, and the author compare the age of Duke and age of two old men. And term can understand it abstract category.
As an abstract category.
Yes.
But
I think the term in this case can analyze this subjective time in the age.
So you want to say that in the story, what is more important? That is a subjective expression of time.
Yes.
То есть здесь больше доминирует субъективное время.
Yes.
Да?
Yes. The author takes remarks. For example, the word of Duke.
Okay. So, any other opinions? Any other opinions? Kirill, you can express yourself in Russian. So feel free to express yourself. Any ideas? If you don't have the ideas, let's go on. So, and now we have come to the message, to understanding of the message of the story. The author succeeded in writing the story in the ironical way, made us laugh and smile. Do you agree with me? That the story had very strong ironical effects. Such admirable human qualities in Duke, like love to life, energy in mind, preference to eternal movement, optimism, win our admiration for Duke. Do you agree with me? Did you like Duke?
Yes.
Did you like, вам понравился этот старик? Duke? All these qualities help old people to stay in the optimistic, energetic, and healthy for many years. The message merely seems to be a glimpse into the choices that everyone has in life. So the general conclusion from the story, is, if we formulate it, is that everybody has the choice. У каждого есть выбор свой, that choice. Yes, to stay alive and optimistic, or to become old and pessimistic, and have dimmed eyes, and is not interesting in anything. So everyone has choice. Do you agree with me? Okay. And in conclusion, to summarize all I have said today, speaking about English literature of the 20th century and speaking about the test of time and place. So let's have some conclusions. The test of time and place, which is revealed in works of the British writers, can be observed in Chesterton's and Bates' short stories. The characters we have analyzed are representatives of their English society, and they reflect their specific qualities, their national consciousness, customs and traditions. The idea of literature is a quintessence of what is flying in the air, the historic tendencies. Imaginative writing of the 20th century continues traditions of classical writers in Great Britain. Speaking about that, so Bayet today he has suggested a very interesting issue, a Russian short story and short story and time, how time is revealed in Russian short stories. Maybe you have some examples. For example. That is a problem. Just to memorize a time. Just a time. To memorize it. Может быть, тогда поможете в русской литературе, пожалуйста, современный, да, мастер коротких рассказов, да, где вот можно было бы это же вот категорию время рассмотреть, да, the category of time.
Yes, okay.
Слушевском, да? Шукшин. Ага, so comes to mind immediately Шукшин, then.
Если также брать на аналогии, то в это же время, когда они писал же и Зощенко.
Зощенко, Михаил Зощенко, yes, you are right. Okay, so we have mentioned the three names. Anything more? Tanya, Vera, Kirill. I'm so sorry, I don't know your names. I know the names of postgraduate students and master students, and that's why, of course, I appeal to them. Do you remember anybody? Of course, you can mention classical literature of the 19th century. Why not? The category of time, so of course, is analyzed, I think, in each of his story, from different angles of vision, different angles. This is the end of the lecture, and I would be happy to answer your questions.